Choose any ATM of your convenience and stand a chance to win gold sovereigns.
Lanka Pay.
A seminar organized in collaboration with the Lakshman Kadragamar Institute and the International Committee of the Red Cross on Artificial Intelligence, Autonomous Weapon Systems and Contemporary Challenges was recently held in Colombo.
Geneva Convention and other texts comes down to one fundamental agreement. Even in wars, humanity must be preserved. Elements that are particularly relevant to Sri Lanka today in relation to international humanitarian law. The post-conflict application of international humanitarian law, and it applies particularly to the issue of missing persons. IHL recognizes the family's right to know the fate and whereabouts of their missing loved one, the right for a missing person to be searched, as well as the obligation to prevent people from going missing. The creation of the Office of Missing Person by the government of Sri Lanka, with a clear mandate, has been a very concrete step toward the implementation of this obligation. The next step, it must be the search for the missing person and providing answers to the families. And on that, of course, as the ICRC, we are ready to provide our technical support. And the voice of Sri Lanka has been very, very clear regarding the grave risks raised by autonomous weapons and the urgent need for new international rules on this system, as well as a new legally binding instrument.
Raises serious concerns over the fundamental principles of international humanitarian law and poses challenges in legal, ethical, security, technological, and humanitarian aspects. The disturbing reality of removal of the human element from the loop could result in anonymous selection of targets without human intervention and breach of the principles of distinction, proportionality, and precaution, as such weapons do not distinguish between civilians and combatants, as well as civilian and military infrastructure. Sri Lanka has been strongly supporting the negotiation of a legally binding instrument to prohibit and regulate lethal autonomous weapon systems. It is our firm belief that responsible chain of command and human control on the use of weapon systems should be retained in the entire life cycle of the autonomous weapon systems, as accountability cannot be transferred to machines under any circumstances. In this context, Sri Lanka welcomes the joint appeal by the Secretary General of the United Nations and the President of the ICRC to urgently establish new international rules on AWS by 2026. From a security perspective, the deployment of autonomous weapon systems could lead to asymmetric warfare. It may also increase the likelihood of conflict escalation, as states are more inclined to engage in armed conflicts when the risk of military casualties is minimized for the user state. Additional risks of AWS include the potential proliferation, access by non-state actors, and even the possibility of mass destruction.
Artificial intelligence itself, indeed, a technology that can be used in different ways. Artificial intelligence doesn't mean its applicability or doesn't mean its relevance to armed conflicts only, indeed. But it's heavily used today for decision making. The issue here is that indeed the way it is being used needs to be considered and reconsidered many times in order to ensure that the way it's used do not contribute to the violations of IHL. Switching to autonomous weapon systems, which also quite heavily rely on the main issue with it is unpredictability of the technology. We really don't know how the technology will behave in the battlefield in the difficult circumstances that armed conflicts provide. From the humanitarian perspectives, indeed, whether autonomous weapon systems will be allowed and will be able actually to deal with the issues that were laid by states while limiting the means and methods of warfare in IHL. The ethical one that has been raised already. Whether we are happy if machine will start killing. Legal one, how to ensure that the machine, the autonomous weapon system, is in conformity with IHL, with specific rules of IHL. Whether it will be able to distinguish between military objectives and civilian objects, between combatants and civilians. Whether it will be able to understand that a military, for example, that a combatant is surrendering, is hors de combat, out of the battle, and thus need to be spared.
On lethal autonomous weapons, Sri Lanka was able to make an useful contribution during Sri Lanka's chairmanship of the CCW in 2015. At a time I served as the ambassador in Geneva. We were able to upgrade the discussion on laws in the CCW, which previously was only between experts and not at national level, to national level. And through this process, within an year, to ensure that the CCW was able to establish an open-ended group of government experts, a GGG, to study, agree on possible recommendations and options relating to emerging technologies on the laws.